111th PAMLA conference. So thank you all for coming. I was not there at the first conference, but I've been there many since, and they're all very good. So we hope you all come. Last year we began the Creative Artist Spotlight event as a new innovation for PAMLA, and since I took over as executive director, I like creative artists, and I like poets and fiction writers, and I'm fond of them. And I thought that there was too big a divide between people who do scholarly writing and people who do creative writing. Because I know a lot of my friends and I write very bad creative writing myself, and some maybe slightly better scholarly writing, maybe not. And I know a lot of my friends who are poets or writers do scholarship as well. So I think it's an artificial divide that we are trying in PAMLA to break down and have people talk to each other across what hopefully will be a divide of the past someday. So I don't think we have a lot of creative creative fiction and poetry sessions. If you look through your program, we've had some today. We have some others going on tomorrow and on Sunday. We have creative writers from UC San Diego, from University of San Diego, from San Diego State, et cetera, from all of our sponsoring universities. And so do look through the schedule, and you can hopefully will attend some of those interspersed with others. So with no further ado, though, I do want to thank our sponsoring universities: University of San Diego, UC San Diego, San Diego State University, which has really been, the sponsorship came from the National Center for the Study of Children's Literature, and Palomar College, and California State University San Marcos, all of whom were very generous and helped us to make this conference possible. And I'd also like to thank all of you who come to the PAMLA, whether you come to 20 PAMLA conferences before or this is your first, and hopefully you'll keep coming. Next year we'll be in Riverside, California. The year after that, we just decided we'll be in Portland at Portland State University, and right in downtown Portland. And then the year after that, if you want to volunteer at your university, let me know. So we're going to have two people introduce our fine creative writers for today, and I'm going to introduce each of the introducers briefly. First, Stephen Gould Axelrod is Distinguished Professor of English at University of California, Riverside, and has authored books on Robert Lowell and Sylvia Plath, edited the New Anthology of American Poetry, Volumes 1 through 3, and edited the Robert Lowell Select Prose forthcoming, along with a lot of other really fine and important works on poets. I had the pleasure of working with Steve as my co-chair of my dissertation at UC Riverside. And I have to say that I think Steve has got one of the finest minds when it comes to analyzing and thinking about poetry in general, but specifically poetry of the mid-19th century. He's also the founder of the Robert Lowell Society, but we can go on and on, and I probably should. I have to say also that Steve is a mensch and has been very kind to me, and I probably wouldn't have gone through my PhD without him. This cross out. So thank you, Steve, for agreeing to introduce Rae Armantrout, who we're proud to have. And then our other introducer is Catherine Cuccinella. She's an assistant professor in the Literature and Writing Studies Department at California State University, San Marcos, also director of General Education Writing. She teaches literature, writing, and pedagogy courses. She received her PhD in English from the University of California, Riverside. There is a secret Riverside subtext here, I think, but we won't talk about it. Her book, Poetics of the Body, Edna St. Vincent Millay, Elizabeth Bishop, Marilyn Chin, was published by Paul Gray in 2010. And the edited biocritical work, Contemporary American Women Poets, an A to Z Guide by Greenwood Press, 2002. She's also published articles on Elizabeth Bishop, other poets, writer and filmmaker Julie Dash, and her most recent project involved TA training and development. And I also have to say that Catherine Cuccinella is one of our site co-chairs for this conference and has worked tirelessly to make sure the conference has been hopefully as positive as it is. So with no further ado, Stephen Gould Axelrod. Hello, thank you very much.
Rae excelled as a graduate student, just as he excels as executive director here, so don't take his modesty at his value. I'm delighted to introduce Rae Armantrout to you. She's one of the great poets of the time. You leave an Armantrout poem moved and shaken, but you don't really know what hit you. You ask yourself, what was that? You're stunned. You need to think. Perhaps you have a half smile on your face, because even if you didn't understand what just happened, the poem was funny. In Rae's poems, the line conspicuously encounters the void, uncertain what comes next, as she says in her collected prose. The result is what she calls a Cheshire poetics, one that points two ways and then vanishes in the blur of what is seen and what is seeing, what can be known and what it is to know. It's a poetics of what she calls collisions and overlaps, contested spaces. It's a tissue of ambiguities and complexities, laconic utterances and eerie silences, intellectual and formal adventures, and oblique social engagements. It's as sophisticated, intelligent, and emotionally engaging as our public rhetoric is so often naive, simplistic, and numbing. Rae's poetry is a ray of light, a loophole for the soul, a double take, a rip along a fault line, a question mark, a collapsing floor, a smile that disappears but leaves a trace or a scar. Rae was born in Vallejo, California, and raised in San Diego. She received her BA from UC Berkeley and her master's in creative writing from San Francisco State. She's a professor of English at UC San Diego. Robert Creeley once said, "I don't think there's another poet writing who is so consummate in authority and yet so generous to her readers." Among Rae's books of poetry are Necromance, 1991, Made to Seem, 1995, Veil, 2001, Up to Speed, 2004, Next Life, 2007, Versed, 2009, Money Shot, 2011, and Just Saying, 2013. She has also collaborated on The Grand Piano, an experimental collective autobiography, 2007, and has published a book of essays and memoir called Collected Prose, 2007. Among her other recognitions, Rae has received the National Book Critics Circle Award and the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. I'm happy and honored to present to you Rae Armantrout.
Stephen, that was a wonderful ripple on the fault line. I'll have to save that one. Okay, well, I don't know if you read the program, but I was asked for a title for this reading, so I titled it basically everything I'm going to read. So I'm going to start reading from my new book, Just Saying. It came out this year. Read a few poems from that. This first poem is called Scripture. I grew up in a house where there was a lot of Bible reading. I got over that pretty early, but I remember it. And so there's a riff in this poem as it gets going, as it goes on the Sermon on the Mount, if you remember that, or if you know that. Consider the lilies of the field. That part? Okay, maybe you'll recognize some of it. Scripture. Your violins pursue the downhill course of streams, even to their wild curls and cowlicks. To repeat is not to catch. Consider the hummingbirds, how they're gussied up and monomaniacal as the worst or best of you. Consider the bright, streamlined emergency they manifest. My leaves form bells, top knots, small cups of sex, overweening, unstoppered. Not one of you, with all your practice, is so extravagantly coiffed. Instead, to each his own severance package. The Inca hacked large stones into the shapes of nearby peaks. The eerie thing is that ghosts don't exist. Rows of clear droplets hang from stripped twigs instead. Pain brings attention to herself. Spine on fire, trailblazer, think she's hot. Out here, slim trunks bend every which. I, at a certain point, got interested in reading about physics, popular books like Brian Greene books, and mostly because it was just a little bit on the edge of my ability to understand and a little beyond, and I enjoyed my bafflement, and I picked up some of the language and, played around with it. So this next poem comes from that. Dress up. To be dressed is to emit virtual particles. The spirit of renormalization is that an electron, all by itself, can have infinite mass and charge, but when it's dressed, a toddler stares at us till we look up. Flirtatious, we call it. She waits until we get the joke about being here, being there. And this one I wrote after actually having lunch with an astrophysicist and trying to talk to him. I thought I had some questions, but he really didn't understand my questions because they weren't good questions. And then I didn't understand his answers. So this poem is not a transcription. It's more like a comic revision of our conversation. Account for Brian Keating. Light was on its way from nothing to nowhere. Light was all business. Light was full speed when it got interrupted. Interrupted by what? When it got tangled up and broke into opposite. Broke into brand new things. What kinds of things? Drinking cup, thinking of you, convenience ballet. How could speed take shape? Hush, do you want me to start over? The fading laser pulse, information describing the fading laser pulse, is stored, is encoded in the spin states of atoms. God is balancing his checkbook. God is encrypting his account. This is taking forever. This next one starts in a national park and ends up with the undead, which I figure is a good thing because when I looked through the list of panels, I saw how many of them were about zombies and vampires. Haunts. Rock-eaten to familiar shapes, heads cocked on jagged spines. How many orange, pink, white rock pinnacles are visible from here? Grandeur is that number plus distance, as if, again, could be made manifest. Nature was a 19th century fad, cousin to eugenics. In the 21st century, America's soft cores undead. On how many bookstore shelves, lovely, fanged teenagers, red-eyed, smeared with blood. The look. The boxer crab attaches a sea anemone to each claw, waves. You, small flower-bearing stick, what is your true name? Spooked and spooked again. It's cute when the intricately patterned black and yellow fish twitches and shoots off in a new direction. From birth, you've been moving your eyes back and forth, looking to be hailed. someone asked me to write something about the apocalypse, and so this is what I wrote. My apocalypse. A woman writes to ask how far along I am with my apocalypse. What will you give me if I tell? An origami fish made from a dollar bill. After the apocalypse, we will all be in a band. We will understand each other perfectly. It's all right, and it doesn't matter. Let it stand for nothing. A weathered, fleshy bicyclist wearing bunny ears and a tie-dyed shirt says zoom as she coasts past. Arrivals. Sign in the airport. It's not how much cloud, but what kind. Welcome. We don't play requests, but we don't play bagpipes either. We figure that's fair. That's the bad boy sass of globalization, kickstarting you on Clear Channel, or even the spin gets spun. Here's one. The devil is a blousy, failed executive who fires burnouts, star after star. Every known object rotates as if. B, keeping busy. C, stunned. Transactions. What do we like best about ourselves? Our inability to be content. We might see this restlessness as a chip not yet cashed in. You appear because you're lonely, maybe. You would not say that. You come to tell me you're saving money by cooking for yourself. You figured out what units you'll need to exchange for units if you intend. I know I mustn't interrupt. Hectic and flexible flames are ideal new bodies for us. Scale. In my youth, I craved the small picture, the artistic, strung-out hearts of ivy, star jasmine, the on and on without budging. I liked Russian icons, circles within circles in the Virgin's halo, the way her cloak matched the sky, which was not the sky at all. Now I see that the outsized personalities of our day, the Brad and Angies, have the blurred, grainy texture indicative of stretching. We get a faint ping back when we focus on these objects. An electron is an excitation in an electron field, a permanent tizzy in the presence of what? Like thought, it creates the ground it covers. Like thought, it can't stop. I want to read some newer work, so I'm going to quit just saying there. I've got a new book coming out, going to be called Itself, and someone did a little chapbook based on some of the poems from Itself, so I'm going to start with that. Rituals. In this now ancient ritual, a succession of young women are saucy, which is to say they name common objects and relations as if they had mastered them but shouldn't. Each receives false approbation. As Christmas sells winter to its prisoners, as warmth feels like love, and love is warmth, only more capricious, fingers uncurl, organs expand and rise toward a surface that must never be broken. Itself. I work it until sweetness rises of itself, then arcs across unfurling petals and is gone. On television, hundreds of albums albino crabs scuffle over one steam vent. I know you're dreaming things I haven't dreamed, wouldn't, but that's part of your costume, like your extra appendages. I was asked to contribute to an anthology in which each poet was going to rewrite a sonnet of Shakespeare. So at first I thought that was kind of nuts, but then when I read the sonnet, I thought the sonnet was so weird because I never really thought about those early sonnets addressed to a handsome young man. Not exactly love poems because they're urging the young man to get married and have children, but still peculiarly fixated on the attractiveness of the young man. So I just started to play around with, why he might be doing that. Whether, for his own sake, maybe his patron's sake. So anyway, you'll see. Sonnet 3. Your dad told me to tell you how good you look to him right now. Check yourself out. I'm sure you do. You're a very pretty boy. But the thing is, that won't last. Have you ever seen a pert old man? An insouciant septuagenarian? I thought not. They're invisible. And you'll be invisible too. What will your dad have to look at then? Do you think growth rebounds each year? Wrong. It has to be outsourced, sublet. Get with the program. Your dad will be watching. Believing. When did you first learn that the bursts of color and sound were intended for you? When did you unlearn this? Believing yourself to have a secret identity can be a sign of madness. On the other hand, the lack of a secret identity can lead to depression. Many have found it useful to lie down as men, believing themselves to be little girls, or as girls, believing themselves to be mermaids stranded in their own bodies. And here are some other poems from itself. A conceit. Local anchors list the ways viewers might enjoy tomorrow. One says, get some great, but that seems like a stretch. The other snickers, meaning, where were you going with that? Like you thought. Like you could defend vanity in the sense of idle conceit, vacuous self-absorption, doing whatever it takes to whatever, because really, as if to say, conceit is the vacuum energy. I have to tell that to my physicist friend. I've discovered it, what it is. And this too references science. Chirality. If I didn't need to do anything, would I? Would I oscillate in 2 or 3 dimensions? Would I summon a beholder and change chirality for him? A massless particle passes through the void with no resistance. Ask what it means to pass through the void. Ask how it differs from not passing. Gotta ask him that too. Sponsor. We drove to the slough and walked briefly along the uneven path. There are plants here you see nowhere else, you said. Pickleweed, duckweed, branching pipettes. Among 20 brown hills, the only moving thing was the Coca-Cola truck. So if that had a little homage to Stephen sort of at the end of it, this is an homage to the spokeswoman for Progressive Insurance. I'm sure you know her. Flow. In this spot for insurance, a savvy young agent, almost pretty, says go big money to a subordinate tap dancing in a $sign costume in front of her confused, bemused clients. This agent, Flo, who is above it all, but enthusiastic too, like the Dalai Lama is becoming an American icon. What I first saw as tiny, novel fireplaces scattered about the living room floor, I now see as the house gone up in flames. But this is wrong, because first was part of now from the very start. And then the panel there was a paper I heard today earlier that referenced Emma Lazarus, so this has a sort of shout out to her by chance. Expression. Give me your spurt of verbs, your welter of pronouns, desiring to be spread, bulge-eyed, clear-bodied brine shrimp bobbing to the surface. I prefer the hermit trundling off in someone else's exoskeleton, but we all come down to self-love which, like a virus, has no love and has no self. So that was a little grim, but that's the end of itself. There are a lot of crabs in itself somehow. So now I'm going to read a few even newer poems from what I'm working on now. We'll see how far I get. Legacy. Do words just pop into your head? Some may go unexploded. Have you thought much about your legacy? I'm a legacy prisoner. No, I'm not. What do you call precious? The precious doesn't get around much, or it stays small, or it orbits the same small pronoun, a kid on a carousel. Look at me, it fiddles with itself, but I've got bigger things to pick up and put down. This next one I wrote after coming back from Hong Kong, where I was with Marilyn Chin, actually. And it's sort of partly about Hong Kong and partly about seeing San Diego after I came back. Exchange. City of the future, in which each subway station stairs lead to the ground floor of a casino mall. What counts is the role defined for each piece by a system of rules saying how it can move, not the stuff the piece is made of. In the intersection, a muscular, shirtless man with small American flags tied to each wrist so that he looks like a wrestler, pushes, no shoves, then catches a stroller piled high with plastic bags, his stuff. City of the future, where a tramway to the top of a peak opens onto a wax museum in which Michael Jackson extends one gloved hand. All true. Action potential. Who sequesters negatively charged ions and weights? Milton's devils make me sad. The way Satan must cross chaos and dark night hour by hour to reach us, actually flying as if space were real. The way he stops and asks directions. Who runs along the tops of trains, leaping from car to car, ratcheted into the present in his top coat, if there are no. Runtime. Hidden redundancy equals logical depth. Up next, the pumpkin carving contest under the sea. You talk to yourself as if somebody cared. Star scrap metal, Neolithic design, citadel outlets, metal poles grow toward the sun. They don't want you to stop. They want to show they know you won't. Word problems. If a fat man with one earlobe distended by a large ring and a thin man in a heavy neck chain sit together checking email, The real is made up of things minus appearance. Near eucalyptus strands of green crescents and their shadows, flighty half-moons, while the soul is made up of appearance minus things. The difficulty. This film, like many others, claims we'll enjoy life now that we've come through difficulties, dangers, so incredibly condensed that they must be over. If the hardship was undergone by others, we identified with them. And if the danger was survived by simpler life forms, they're included in this moment when the credits roll and we don't know when to stand. All right, I'm just going to read two more because I'm probably going on longer than I thought, which I always do. Before, would my life be like a letter to you then? We never wrote letters. I'm passing the signs we slipped by together. There goes soda and swine. That name is funny because it's a joke we shared about alliteration, right? If I can describe the feeling of your absence precisely, which means using the names of things, buds blacken against blanched light. As ever, St. Didicus Bell's ditty reminds us of itself, something old and automated, dividing before from now, again and again, these two, for a moment, still similar. And this will be the last one. Transport. Would you like the world to end now, in your lifetime, so you don't miss anything? Would you like the world to go on so that someone later might feel as you once did? Did you feel anxious when alone? Did you feel restless at parties? If clear yellow petals are enough, like sails, I'll be well away. I'll be on my way to this late summer dusk.